Thank you, Jose, for that very generous introduction, I must say. Good afternoon, all. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, so I think when Jose invited me to talk about, sustainability and thinking of imagining a smarter future, I was wondering how do I say so many things in the little time of 9 minutes that I have, but I think I can just simply take you from Toby's speech in the morning about how we are living in very interesting times, and by interesting we mean complex, dynamic, evolving set of problems that we are dealing with, whether it's the geopolitical situation, the environmental and economic crisis, war-induced energy crisis. Clearly, I think uncertainty is the new certainty that we are dealing with, and I think it makes us think as to can we use the tools and the toolbox that we have used to solve problems, is that going to be relevant as we go forward to solve the problems that are itself evolving and changing? Probably we'll have to bring new tool sets and toolbox to the game and be ready for that. And I think I look at digital as one of the as a very passionate subject of study for me personally, and I look at the role digital as a technology has as part of this uncertainty that we're dealing with. And I think, again, going back to Toby's comments, that internet did bring us closer, but also made us vulnerable in many which ways. So when you're talking about a smarter future in the context of digital and digital economy, I think the questions we need to answer for is that going to be inclusive, equal opportunity for all? Does it provide that? Is it going to be a fair play? Does it offer scale, participation, revive and keep the economy vibrant, not just for a few big corporates, but for a small delivery agent to a small home-based home pickle manufacturer or an artisan, or for bigger small companies? How do we unlock the challenges in the supply chain with digital? I think clearly, we have given it a lot of ourselves to submit to the technology of digital. Digital is the new technology that is kind of significantly defining the future in some sense. But I think a tryst with technology is something that it has this very old love and hate relationship. And if I were to talk about enabling smarter future, for a moment I would like to take you back into the history, because history does give us interesting lessons for future. And I'll probably, if I can dial back not just by a few years, but by a few hundred years, and take you back to the 18th century, you'll clearly recognize how something that we were going through as an embrace of technology is something that we are going through right now, and clearly it's rhyming. Of course, the technology at that time was not digital for sure, but the technology at the time was the railroads. The whole railroad industry was taking off in a big way, more so in America than in other places, and we realized that railroads is a great way to drive economic development, because it takes us goods faster to the markets, to the ports and other places, and gives us people to travel and access opportunities across geography. But somewhere we realized that this railroad should not be just a private investment, but by few companies who have the wherewithal of the technology and sort of consolidate and protect that for their own benefit, and not let the market build on top of that technology. And that's where I think the idea of railroad as an infrastructure, as a public good, sort of became a very moot topic around the late 19th century. And they realized that it should open up as an infrastructure that everybody can access. And that, as some say, that literally catapulted American economy way beyond Europe. And the railroads, the moment it was opened up as a public infrastructure, allowed a wider economic development, a wider access to opportunity. It became a very egalitarian sort of a technology on which we can look at economic growth and prosperity of the last several hundred years. Yeah, and I think, and if you heard Nandan's speech yesterday, we are talking about the public goods in the digital realm, based out of digital technologies, but as public goods which solve for the same thing. Can it allow everybody to access, build solutions on top of it, and enable prosperity and some economic development, social equality, and probably deal with some of these complex problems of energy crisis and others? Using technology is one of the leverage tool, but think differently about technology using digital public goods. And And then alluded to how India is trying to create digital public goods like the digital rails, which is enabling that access. And we could see suddenly over the last decade kind of the significant, almost like a Cambrian explosion of adoption of digital public goods. I'm not going to spend much time, but I think the numbers are mind-boggling by itself and at the speed at which they are happening. And that's one thing that I think we must continuously look at as a way forward to solving some of the complex problems, not as a sole solution, but as one of the important ways to relook at how digital comes into play of our lives for the entire humanity and civilization as such. And that one such area that Beckn Foundation was focusing on is to sort of think about how do we, while we have heard of UPI solving for payments and financial inclusion, and we are looking at DEPA to monetize data to get low-cost credit, or to get it, or using eKYC to get faster bank account opening or a phone connection, we realize that is there an opportunity to create and think of a digital public good that solves for another important problem of our times, which is access to markets, especially digital markets. I think, as I said, digital is pervasive. More and more we are shopping online, we are looking for things, products, and even learning, skilling ourselves. I mean, those are something that we look at digital as a significant sort of a avenue to look at opportunities. And that's where I think, is there a way we need to solve for the crisis that is there around digital access, and that's rampant, not as a problem, not just in one sector or in one country, but across countries. Whether it's about a taxi driver putting up a hand and saying, I am here, I have a right available, but I am at the mercy of some big tech platform to say that, my rights are limited, my autonomy, my agency to do business is limited by the rules of somebody else. Somebody else is carrying the kill switch for my business, for my livelihood, for my access to learn and educate myself, for my access to do business, whether I'm a taxi driver or a delivery boy or a small grocery store during pandemic trying to find customers online during the lockdown. So that's one of the issues that we realized, and this is where it's important to recognize how digital, if you were to reimagine digital through the way of interoperability, and this goes back to the design of internet itself. Now, the one thing that I want to do today is to update your vocabulary and make sure that when you go back, so not talk about digital as a bunch of platforms, but as a network. As a network, because internet is a network, it's not a platform. If one person control internet, and if internet was not open, we will probably not have internet becoming the host of the world's biggest content network, learning avenue, hotel industry, or a big taxi company, all because there's an open interoperable internet. And that happened because the way internet was designed, it is built on very, very egalitarian, public, open specifications that drive interoperability, that makes anybody connect to the internet and build something on top of it. And it's in that space, like some of the protocols, some of the computer engineers in the group will understand how the protocols are the essential bedrock on which some of these infrastructures are built. We realize that there is something that needs to be done to make internet more inclusive, more non-rivalrous, and not just let the big tech companies with one or two big companies trying to sort of solve for the problem of access and scale just by themselves, and allow many more people to participate and make this a reality. So if you look at today, if you look at any sector, whether it's mobility, food delivery, e-commerce, you just have one or two big platforms trying to solve this for the population scale. And today, if you look at India in specific, e-commerce penetration for some reason is just about 6 to 7% or less than that. That's about 40-50 million users shopping online for a country of 1.3 billion people. We heard yesterday from Nandan that there are 250 million people who now use digital payments through UPI. And yet, less than 100 million people shop online. So how do we solve for population scale access for both buyers and sellers online to harness internet, access the opportunity, find demand, and do that? And that cannot be at the behest of few tech companies alone trying to solve for that. And that's where we are trying to say, how do we make economy on internet a bit more inclusive through another digital building block that can probably be layered on top of internet to solve for that. And that's where beckn comes in. While pretty much you know that these protocols that we have today, while we have TCP/IP that connects the networks and SMTP for emails, there was nothing perhaps before beckn that was solving for this economic transactions. Whether I'm looking for a taxi ride or a packet of bread in the neighborhood or a room stay, I am dependent on one or two technology companies to help me find it. But on internet or on email, it was never built that way that only one platform does that. I mean, if you're looking for a piece of information, you could access any website with no intermediary in between. Similarly with emails, if you're a sender or a receiver of emails, you don't have to be on the same platform to exchange emails. Similarly, can we do something that with internet? And that's where beckn comes in. And I think what beckn does fundamentally is to break these silos, wherein today, if you look at any model of economic transaction, it is sort of set on this premise that both the buyer and the seller, the consumer and the provider, need to be on the same platform. Whether you're in a mobility service, you have to have the same app that the taxi driver is using, or food delivery or retail. Now, this model has a scale issue because you are depending on 1-2 platforms to have the capital and the energy to get every buyer and every seller on board, which is different in a country like India. And then you need to make sure there's a challenge of the intermediary who's trying to put the platforms, his incentives are aligned. Today we have companies struggling, saying that they use my data and they build their own business online and become a seller. How do I deal with that? So somewhere there's loss of agency as a seller, loss of autonomy. I'm playing on somebody else's rule. Somebody else has the kill switch. So to solve this, I think we have to fundamentally relook at the design and go back to the old design of internet itself, wherein internet, it did not bother which browser you are using. You could access any website and content. Similarly with emails, you could be on any email platform but send mails to anybody using another platform. Here again, can we do that for commerce? Can we do that for mobility? Can we do that for healthcare? Wherein the buyer and seller could be on any different platforms and still find each other, trust each other, and do transactions with each other. Whether I'm buying a packet of bread or booking a ride or finding a doctor to do teleconsultation during pandemic, etc. And that's where the idea of a protocol is nothing but a basic vocabulary that makes two machines understand the economic characteristics of a transaction. How do I find something? How do I place an order? How do I track? Whether it's for healthcare, it's for a chapter on AI as part of learning, or finding bread or things like that. And that's some of the and that's exactly where beckn comes in. I know we are desperately short of time, but I was asked to speak about ONDC. ONDC is one such network that is going in a big way in India. I'm sure most of you would have heard about how the ONDC is scaling. ONDC is using the beckn protocol as a way to reimagine e-commerce marketplaces, not as a single platform. The government is not saying I will set up a platform to solve for some of the issues in the market, but they're saying, why don't we create an ecosystem where we have the protocol and allow multiple platforms. Some of them are public platforms like CSC organization trying to sell a buyer interface, but the many private, the big or small platforms, it could have the biggest e-commerce player or the smallest e-commerce player, the biggest logistic company or the smallest logistic company coming together and enabling this network to happen such that I as a buyer have choice to be on any app and discover every possible buyer that I'm looking for without having to be on the same platform as a seller. Similarly, the seller, I am not at the mercy of one particular platform to get me customers. That's pretty much the reason why I join a platform, saying that, oh, you have all the customers, let me come and be a seller on your platform. Now, I have a choice as a seller. Let's say a grocery store, I can build my own little server. I mean, I'm already seeing implementation of entrepreneurs building small Raspberry Pi servers to get a Kirana store online directly onto ONDC without having to depend on an intermediary. That possibility of creating a network of platforms where even market participates and build on top of it, that's something that ONDC is doing. Going big already, we are doing some pilot implementations across well over 20-30 cities. There are 9 platforms which are live. And I think there's a big announcement by the end of this month or early next month. You will have many users, all the users in Bangalore at least will have access to ONDC. We'll be able to find all the sellers on ONDC through one of the apps that have been part of ONDC, and soon we'll have it rolled out in many other cities. So the idea, therefore, I want to leave behind is that if there is a way to distribute the ability to solve rather than trying to solve by yourself, don't try to be the big tech company trying to, I will solve for the mobility problem or I will solve for the retail e-commerce problem as one company. But if you can allow to work along with other market players and create an ecosystem through digital public goods like beckn protocol, we probably can achieve market expansion, solve for access, and build a bit of social equity and help small businesses to find a way to have a presence in digital economy, not just presence but also thrive without having to be at the mercy of some intermediary. I'll stop here and probably take some of your questions around lunch or whenever we meet offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujith. That was wonderful. I think the essence of it is when you democratize, there will always be growth and there will always be a win-win case for everyone.